End wraps or end papers are lightweight, wet stretch tissue papers. They are used to control the hair strand as we wrap it around a perm rod. It allows us to wrap the hair smoothly around the rod. These end papers are also porous, and they allow the chemical, such as perm solution, which we use, to be absorbed through the porous end paper onto the hair shaft. There are various types and various sizes of end papers. This one is a super jumbo end wrap. It is 3 inches by 4 inches. These are really good for long hair, also very good for layered hair. There's also jumbo end wraps, which are 4 inches by 2.5 inches, a little bit smaller than this one, but still really good for long hair or layered hair. And then there's regular end wraps. And regular end wraps, you can see the difference in the size. They are 2.25 inches by 3.25 inches. So they're a little smaller, but they're good for short hair, most commonly used for short hair, but also could be used for long hair. So these are the end papers, and the type of end wraps that you can do with these vary. You can fold this end paper horizontally, and this becomes the bookend wrap, and it resembles a little book, and that's why it's referred to as the bookend wrap. You can also fold vertically, and when you fold an end paper vertically, it is a vertical bookend, but it's mostly used for specialty wraps such as spiral wraps or on longer hair. So this is a good way to protect the hair ends and control the hair ends on longer hair, so the vertical bookend. We can also use the double flat wrap. So this is when we take one end paper, we don't fold it in any way, we place some hair on top of that end paper and then another end paper over top. So the hair is sandwiched between 2 end papers. This is really good for wrapping long layered hair. Can be used on any hair type though, but good for long layered hair. Then we have a single wrap, and this is where we just use one end paper on top of the hair strand, so the strand is underneath, and this one end paper we just use to control the hair as we wrap it around the rod. We can also use the single end wrap or this single wrap for a technique called layering and cushioning, and that's when you might use a bookend wrap with your short hair. Maybe it's medium length hair, but once you have the bookend on, you'll notice as you roll up some hairs protrude because maybe the client has some layering. Then you can place a single flat and keep rolling, and that's referred to as a technique called layering or cushioning. So I'm just going to demonstrate for you quickly the types of wraps. Let's make sure you can see. So the first type of wrap is called the bookend. So we'll just take our section of hair, and remember our panel is always the length of a rod, just slightly narrower than the length of our rod, and our subsection is always the diameter of the rod that you're using. Use your target parting. Comb that hair once very well. Sometimes when you're first starting, you might have to comb the hair a couple of times, but try and get into the habit of combing the hair once. Place your end wrap on. So remember, this is the bookend, so we just hold it by the spine, place it on the hair, and bring it down so that the ends are inside the end paper. You don't want any hair protruding past your end papers, no matter what technique that you're using, because if the hair is protruding past, you're going to get a fishhook end. And what a fishhook end is when the hair is curly and then it goes straight and then has a little curl at the bottom, and this look resembles a fish hook, and that's why they refer to it as a fish hook end. So once your end paper's on, you're ready to start wrapping. And there is a video on how to wrap perm rods, so you can watch that video. But that is how we use the bookend wrap. Remember to use your target parting, and the next wrap I'm going to do is the double flat wrap. So to perform the double flat wrap, we're going to remember 2 end papers are used, one on the bottom, one on the top. Pull those end papers down so that no hair is protruding. Add a little moisture. It makes it easier when you're first starting to wrap. And that is the double flat wrap. And now the single flat wrap. We just take one end paper, place it on top, and make sure again that those ends are inside the end paper. And then hopefully that allows us some control. The single flat wrap is a little bit trickier to get used to doing, but it's really good for super short hair. Remember, you always want to see your elastics. You don't want your elastics to be tucked into the hair towards the scalp too much. So you want to have even tension, so the rod is touching this side of the head at the same time it's touching this side of the head. As we roll it up, they both touch at the same time. And sometimes we have to curve our rod in slightly. So if you're using your perm rod, you might have to tilt it in slightly to follow the curve of the head, especially when we're working along the front area. So the next end wrap I wanted to show you is the vertical end wrap, and that vertical end wrap is usually used on longer hair. So I'm just going to switch mannequins, and when you're doing a vertical end wrap, it's a lot of times used for spiral perms. And remember, even if you're doing a spiral perm, you still need to make sure that your section is the diameter of the rod you're using. So I'm just going to carve out a panel here, make my section the diameter of the rod, and your end paper is placed on here vertically, pulled right down. Make sure your ends are inside. You can see them inside the end paper. When you're wrapping spiral, you'll want to start near the bottom of your rod. I always like to have my elastic hanging down so it's in my hand with my comb. Wrap around a couple of times and then start to slowly spiral up. Now, if you have little hairs that are poking through, you can use the technique of layering or cushioning. So now we use a single flat wrap, and we continue to roll. And if you need, if there was more hairs protruding, you could add another single flat wrap. And that way you control all the ends that might be protruding as you're wrapping up. Now with this technique, when you're doing a spiral, I like to clip the rod at the top. I find when you go to take the perm down, like after you've rinsed it and you go to remove the rods, and that's what I mean by take down the perm, when you remove the rods, if all the clips are near the top, I find it easier to unsecure this and take down the perm and it's easier to find. You're not digging underneath here, digging under, trying to get hold of your clip. It's right there where you need it, and then you can take it out. So those are the 3 types of end wraps. We use end papers to do the end wraps. We have a bookend wrap, a double flat wrap, a single flat wrap, and vertical bookend. And we also have the technique of cushioning or layering our end papers. The one thing I just want to mention about cushioning or layering end papers is that if I wanted this perm to take on the shape of the gray rod, if I know I'm going to be cushioning or layering with more than one perm end paper, I would probably use a size smaller, because even though end papers are quite thin, they do add, as we wrap end papers around and then another end paper and another end paper, they can increase the diameter of the rod slightly. So if I'm using a pink or salmon colored rod and I've wrapped a number of end papers around this rod, I may increase and change the curl pattern, increase the curl pattern. So sometimes, and maybe not everybody agrees with this, but sometimes, depending on the hair, and remember, each client who sits in your chair is an individual. Depending on the hair, you might want to go down one rod size, depending on the hair type and how many perm single flat wraps you're going to use on one rod. So that's our end wraps, and try each one of them. They each have a role that they play as you work with your clients behind the chair.